Picture this. A single batch of medicine is making its way through a vast, global, and incredibly complex pharmaceutical supply chain. We're talking dozens of hands, crossing international borders, and moving through some highly technical manufacturing processes. But when it really comes down to it, who actually holds the ultimate personal accountability to stand up and say, yes, this medicine is safe and ready for a patient? It is a massive burden of responsibility. And it doesn't just fall on some faceless corporation, it falls on one single person. Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're going to completely unravel the legal and good manufacturing practice, or GMP, foundations of that exact person, the qualified person, commonly known as the QP. We're going to dive directly into the frameworks that make this role one of the absolute most critical safeguards we have in modern healthcare. Here is our roadmap for this Explainer. We'll start with the legal foundations, then look at authorizations and the MA. Third is certify, release, and supply. Fourth, we'll cover reliance and accountability. Fifth is judgment and refusal. And finally, we'll wrap up with interlocking pharma roles. Let's get right into it.
Okay, Section 1, the legal foundations. Let's establish exactly what rules govern the QP.
So there's a really sharp, critical divide here between law and guidance, and you absolutely have to grasp this to understand the QP role. At the very top, you have the law. These are binding statutory requirements, things like the Human Medicines Regulations 2012 in the UK, or the various EU directives and regulations. Basically, they are not optional. But sitting just below the law is GMP guidance. Guidance texts, like the Udralex annexes, basically interpret those binding laws. They tell the industry exactly how regulators expect those laws to actually be met in practice. Now, this right here is essentially the operational Bible for QP certification, Udralex Annex 16. The current version has been up and running since April 2016. What's crucial to keep in mind is that even though Annex 16 was born in the EU and EEA, it has also been fully adopted by the MHRA as UK GMP guidance, so it bridges both jurisdictions. But remember, at the end of the day, it is technically guidance interpreting the law, not the law itself. However, post-Brexit, we've got to be really careful about applying jurisdiction labels, because the UK just isn't a single regulatory position anymore. Great Britain, meaning England, Scotland, and Wales, now has its own domestic import routes, and we're definitely seeing some divergence from EU rules. Northern Ireland, on the flip side, operates under the Windsor framework. That keeps it much, much closer to EU positions, especially for things like investigational medicinal products. So whenever you're dealing with supply chains in this region, you always have to specify, are we talking about Great Britain or Northern Ireland?
Moving on to Section 2, authorizations and the MA. We know the laws now, but what specific licenses make lawful supply actually happen?
It basically boils down to two major authorizations. First up is the MIA, the Manufacturing and Import Authorization. This one is the heavy hitter. It legally permits a site to manufacture or import medicines, and crucially, it formally names the qualified persons. Simply put, there is absolutely no QP certification without an appropriate MIA. Now contrast that with the WDA, the Wholesale Dealer's Authorization. This permits the distribution of medicines. In the UK, it also names the RP, the Responsible Person for Import, who oversees certain imports from the EEA. But mark this really carefully. An RP is not a QP, and a WDA does not allow anyone to certify a batch.
So the big takeaway is that while the MIA gives the QP the authority to certify, the Marketing Authorization, or MA, tells them what they are actually certifying against. The MA is the ultimate rulebook for the product. It defines the approved composition, the manufacturing process, the testing controls, the labeling, all of it. When a QP signs their name to a batch, they are legally confirming that it complies not just with general GMP standards, but meticulously, point by point, with this specific MA rulebook.
All right, Section 3, certify, release, and supply. It's actually wild how often people inside the industry mix up these three completely distinct acts.
People will often casually say, oh, the QP released the batch to the market. Actually, scratch that. Technically, that's wrong. Let's walk through the three sequential steps. Step 1 is QP certification. This is the personal, legally binding act of the QP under Annex 16, confirming the batch meets GMP and the MA. Done. Step 2 is quality unit release. This is just an internal system decision operated within the pharmaceutical quality system to physically move the batch into saleable stock. And finally, step 3 is supply, the actual commercial act of placing that batch on the market. A batch can easily be QP certified on a Monday, but not actually released by the quality unit until Wednesday. They are entirely separate milestones. That brings us to Section 4, Reliance and Accountability. We are now entering the real core of the QP's universe. The foundational rule here is the single QP responsibility principle. While a company's license might name several QPs for coverage, only one single QP takes responsibility for a specific batch certification. Now, let's be realistic. One person obviously cannot physically test every single vial or watch every manufacturing step happen. The QP has to rely on documented systems, testing labs, and competent colleagues. And that reliance is perfectly legitimate. However, and this is absolutely crucial, accountability is never transferred by reliance. If a QP relies on a testing lab, and it turns out that lab's data was falsified, the QP still retains the ultimate accountability for certifying that batch. And that leads right into the mantra every good QP lives by: rely on but assure. You are totally allowed to rely on validated systems and highly trained staff, but you are required to actively assure yourself that those systems are genuinely in control. You've got to monitor metrics, review product quality reviews, and challenge the gaps. Just because a problem report hasn't landed on your desk does not automatically mean you're compliant. You have to assure the integrity of the evidence itself.
Section 5, Judgment and Refusal. Let's look at the strict limits of a QP's professional discretion when things inevitably go a little sideways in manufacturing.
We need to drop the hammer on the single biggest misconception regarding QP discretion. Judgment never, ever overrides law or the marketing authorization. Don't get me wrong, professional judgment is a vital, necessary skill. It's how you weigh evidence and manage residual uncertainty. But that judgment is bounded by a hard, unyielding wall. You simply cannot use a risk assessment to waive away a mandatory legal requirement. To put it as plainly as possible, professional judgment decides how to comply with the rules, not whether to comply. Say a batch marginally fails a binding assay limit set out in the MA. A commercial manager might come in and argue, look, it's low risk to the patient, just release it. But the QP literally can't do that. Claiming a failure is low risk does not somehow magically permit a QP to certify a non-compliant batch. The MA is binding, period. Let's look at a quick fictional educational case study to brilliantly illustrate how organizational independence empowers the QP. We'll call the company North Star. Imagine a reviewer spots a conflict between two records for batch NS-2401. Management is applying immense commercial pressure to get the batch certified today. They need the revenue. But the QP stands firm, investigates, and confirms the conflict reflects a very real deviation from the MA. Despite all that pressure, the QP absolutely must refuse to certify. They document their reasons and trigger an assessment of any related batches. Refusing to certify a batch can sound super dramatic, right? But it is so critical that we reframe how we view it. A refusal is not a system failure. When the evidence doesn't fully support compliance, saying no is the ultimate safeguard. It protects the patient, and it protects the integrity of the whole supply chain. It is an expected, fully legitimate professional act. This is exactly why the QP's organizational reporting lines have to be structured in a way that protects them from retaliation when they have to make this tough call. Finally, Section 6, Interlocking Pharma Roles. Let's zoom back out a bit and look at the supporting cast of characters in this supply chain. These distinct roles interlock with incredibly firm boundaries to protect the patient and that final certification decision. The marketing authorization holder, or MAH, owns the product license and maintains the rulebook. The manufacturer operates under an MIA to actually make the product to GMP standards. The quality unit runs the day-to-day systems and assembles all the evidence. Then the QP, named on the MIA, reviews that evidence and performs the personal active certification. And lastly, the RPI oversees certain imports into Great Britain, but again, they perform zero certification themselves. Those firm boundaries between roles are what protect the integrity of the final decision. Just before we wrap up, we have to highlight a really critical piece of regulatory divergence for the UK, because this landscape is evolving fast. As of January 1st, 2025, batches that are QP certified in the EEA and imported into Great Britain via the RPI route will carry strict UK-only labeling conditions. Furthermore, QPs named on a UK MIA must physically be UK resident. It's just a stark reminder that staying current on jurisdictional rules isn't a bonus, it's a mandatory part of a QP's continuing competence. Well, we have covered a lot today. The legal frameworks, the authorizations, and the unyielding nature of personal responsibility. So, I want to leave you with this one thought. knowing that this ultimate accountability cannot be outsourced, it can't be diluted by reliance, and it certainly can't be voted away by a committee. Are you prepared to be the one whose signature is on the line? Are you prepared to look commercial pressure in the eye and say no when a batch falls short? It's an immense gravity. Keep that in the back of your mind as you look forward to exploring how a QP actually reviews an evidence package in our next module. Thank you so much for joining this explainer.